What's up there, YTPC and the YouTube community at large? This is Eric Rana, the Road King Piper, coming to you in the kitchen here at Casa de Rana. Nope, don't have a pipe, not doing a pipe video. I am doing a how-to video on prepping and preparing and cooking a brisket, Texas style. That's right. It's actually on a live stream with Martin over at the over a pipe. This has probably been at least a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, and they got on the subject of barbecuing. Of course, we were following that up right in the chat. I said, hey, you want me to throw down a video on how to, prep and cook a brisket? And everybody's like, yeah. I was, okay, here we go. This is probably going to be a rather lengthy video because there's a lot of stuff that goes into prepping a brisket. Now, how many different ways are there to actually prepare a brisket if you're going to smoke it? How many people barbecue? That's how many different ways. The basic formula is trim, smoke, slice, and eat. That's pretty much it. Trim, rub, smoke, slice, and eat. Yeah, I just got confused for a second. I do an extra step. I do an injection, and then we do all the rest of the stuff before we get into the actual cooking part. So, how do I do it? Okay, well, I'm not going to actually cook it today. It's approximately 7 o'clock on Sunday night. Tomorrow is Memorial Day. I'm going to actually be doing the cooking tomorrow, but I'm going to start my prep tonight because what I found, and it took me about 15 years to figure this out, how I like it done is I do a trim and then I do an injection, and I let the injection sit overnight, and that seems to give me the best flavor. So we're going to start all that stuff tonight. We're going to trim the brisket up. We're going to unpackage it, pat it down, trim it. I'm not going to spare any expense, so you're going to see the whole thing. So you probably want to fast forward through some of the stuff. But I'm going to trim it. We're going to inject it, and then we're going to put it in a pan, cover some aluminum foil, stick it in the fridge tonight, and then tomorrow we'll start the cooking process. Okay, so what do you need? Well, you'll need a cutting board, sharp knife. I use a 6 to 7 inch boning / fillet knife. I've got gloves. I've got my injection stuff, my marinades. We'll talk about that later. I've got my aluminum pan for the brisket itself, and the most important thing, one big brisket. Now this one is pretty big. It is about 16 pounds, 15.67 pounds. Geez, Road King, how much did that cost you? Glad you asked that. It was $3.99 a pound at a grand total of $62.52 on May the 3rd, or before May the 3rd of 23. And it is now the 28th. And this has been sitting in the freezer on Thursday or Friday. I put it in the fridge. It is now thawed out and ready to go. So let's go ahead. Let me change the camera position, and we'll get started on getting this thing opened. We'll pat it down, and we'll start the whole process. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, we're actually on an elevated counter here with a camera. I've got my tripod at full extension, camera facing down. There it is. Let me see if I can make a few adjustments. Yeah, you're not going to see my handsome face. I know y'all are going to be upset by that. Okay, so here's our brisket in all its glory. I'm going to grab some paper. First thing I need to do is dry my hands a little bit. Let me wash my hands. Told you we weren't going to miss anything. Let me show you all, everything is full detail. All right. One of the things you probably want to have when you are working on said brisket is an apron. I've found that this process can be a little on the messy side. Okay. Now, for those of you that don't know, the brisket comes from the front part of the cow, between the chest and the front leg. It is a two-headed muscle. If you were to actually cook this hot, fast and quick over a fire, you would end up with something along the lines of the tenderness of dried shoe leather. So this is a very, very tough muscle. This one happens to be prime. The basic structure of it is a two-headed muscle. This is called the flat because, well, it's flat. This is called the point because it looks like a point. I know, you're probably looking for something that was a little bit more in depth than that, if I can talk. First thing I'm gonna do is just take the knife and cut the plastic. I like when it splits like that. Sometimes it doesn't. Most times it doesn't. Now, there is a sizable amount of juice in here. People are like, well, that's blood. And that's not blood. That is moisture from the muscle. Everything here in the United States, we go ahead and make sure that all the meat has been drained of any blood. At the slaughterhouse, you grab some paper towels here. And the reason why we do that is because if blood stays in the meat for any length of time, it will turn rancid. Really pretty quick. I'm going to attempt to take this out. I'd rather take this out in the sink. In my box here. So I'm going to do that real quick. I know y'all can't see it very well, but that way if any of the juice does happen, just like that, it gets in the sink. And that is said brisket. So I'm going to wipe this, pat this down, get this dry. This is the top. This is the actual what's called the fat cap. I always smoke the brisket fat cap up. That's the bottom of the brisket. Again, this is a prime brisket as opposed to select or choice. I've done all three. I like prime, but I can usually get a really good result out of just about anything because it's about prep time, not about the quality of the meat. Let me go and bring some of this stuff out here. Okay. Let's see. Piece of fat there. I've got a pan right over here. I'll put that in there. Why are you going to do that? I'm going to be making some beef tallow, which I'm going to put in this pan right here. Put over on the stove at low and render it out. Filter it. Okay, let's take a look at what we got here. Again, prime, which means we got a good marbling of fat and into the meat. Most of this fat's really chunky. It's really thick. This is the bottom of the brisket. This is going to go down. We got a lot of meat showing here, so I'm going to get rid of all this fat that's on here. And there's also some kind of a connective tissue of some type right here. I'm going to try and trim all this off. Again, I'm going to show you everything. You can use a bigger knife. Again, I like the boning knife. It works really well for me. This is pretty much, just useless when it comes to rendering because this is going to go down. This right here, this fat right here, actually is a dividing between the two muscles and goes in this direction. I'll be trimming some of that out a little bit later. Now, if I happen to take some of the meat with it, not a big deal. As you can see, I am pulling some of the meat back. So I'm going to trim all of this fat all the way down just to get to the meat. I'm going to pull while I do this. And everything's going to go into said pot so I can make my beef tallow later. I don't like to waste anything, especially in this day and age with our economy in such a shamble here. Try to make this as quick as possible. Now, you guys can scrub your video if this gets a little bit boring, because I'll be, yammering on about a whole lot of nothing. I might even decide to, in the editing process of this video, to hit warp speed or light speed. Depends on whether or not you're Star Trek or Star Wars. The upside is, you don't see my handsome face. Well, I don't know if it's an upside or a downside. I'm going to take a big old chunk of this off here. Again, if I take a little bit of meat with it, that's fine. In fact, take a look right here. We got some gray meat right there, kind of brownish. That will be trimmed off, and I will not use that for anything else. And when I do see some of that right here, take a look here. Take a look here. We got this beautiful reddish color here. But right here along the edges, we see some brown. Well, that's all going to be trimmed off because that is actually meat that's been semi-cooked in the packaging process. And I don't want that on my pit at all, and I don't want that in my finished product. Now, I am prepping the brisket as if, well, not just as if, I'm prepping it specifically for entertainment. This is everything that I would do if I'm gonna have a big old barbecue, which I am tomorrow for my son's birthday. Got a lot of people coming over. My goal here is maximum yield for the brisket. So all the meat's gonna get pretty much saved except for the brown part. And you can see right here, we've got really nice fat in the muscle itself. Everybody's like, fat? Fat's bad. No, fat's, when it comes to flavor, fat's where it's at. Trying to get some of this skin here trimmed back. Now, if I was preparing it for competition, I would be doing things a little different. Way different. Something more uniform, because I'm only going to get about 5 to maybe 8 or 9 slices. That's not fat. 5, maybe 8 or 9 slices for my turn-in box. Now, have I done competition? Yes, I have. How did I do? Well, my first competition was in Lockhart in 2012. Yeah, I probably should have just stayed home. I kind of got a little bit over my head. The second competition I was at was the Shirts Jubilee, which is on July the 4th. It used to be on July the 4th. And there's a rib competition, and I entered that. 32 teams total. They have a max number of teams. And I went ahead and did that and placed 11th on my second competition, which is pretty cool. Like I said, all I'm doing is just cutting down the fat. It doesn't look very good. Let me just get that completely out there. It's like a blood vessel or something. So I'm going to cut around that. No, yeah, it's a blood vessel. You can hear that. You can hear I took a sniff of it, and yeah, it's there. Okay, so we got some of that. Right here is just a little bit of a layer of that brown meat. I'm gonna go ahead and just slice that off. That's unusual for it to be right there, but it was. I'm like, wow. I got the, over here in the sink, I've got the plastic that I'm gonna eventually throw away. Okay, now eventually I'm gonna come back to that. I'm gonna go ahead and get to the fat cap. Okay, when it comes to fat cap, like I said, a lot of people do things differently. Some people will trim it. Some people will leave it. Again, this is not going to render. Not all of it. But I do want the fat to render. I also want a situation where people are eating the brisket, eating the meat, and not too concerned about the fat because it's relatively thin. So I'm going to trim this to 1/8 to 1/4 inch off the meat. Now, if I happen to trim into the meat itself, I'm not going to worry about it. Okay? So, just kind of getting a feel for it. Yeah, this is really thick. I do have some of that brown meat right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and go right into it. And there's the meat. Yeah, don't be bashful. You're going to get this. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The meat, the fat that's really going to count for our rendering is going to be what's in the meat itself. That's intertwined and marbled in with the meat itself. That's the fat that's really going to render really well. This is more acting like an insulation up top, at least in my opinion. Some people have a different view, but this is why I go fat cap up. Now, the butchering process, of course, done at a factory, they're not really too concerned about how it turns out, so you're missing a big old chunk of fat down here. And in the process of packaging, now we have a brown spot. So I'm not really all that complimentary when it comes to, let's back off a little bit. If you start to cut into it, just back off and come back out a little bit farther. This one's actually trimmed relatively well. Normally there's usually a lot of fat right here, way more than this. Like I said, I don't have a whole lot of good things to say about factory butchers because they make this kind of mistake, very brazen mistake. Now, one of the things in my household is that when it comes to buying barbecue meat, I do not buy the barbecue meat. Nope, I don't do it. It's, for some reason, when I buy the barbecue meat, it could be ribs, It could be brisket, it could be pork butt, it could be anything. I usually end up getting a piece of meat that just doesn't work really well. And I try to, take more of a barbecuer's approach to it when I'm looking for, and it doesn't really come out very well. It's a little thin. It's a little surprised by that. It's kind of a stretchy kind of fat. There's a couple of different types of it. You got this stretchy stuff, and then you got a chalky kind of thick fat. A lot of different, stuff in here. Anyway, going back to what I was saying, this is all fat right here. My wife buys the barbecue meat, and she'll tell you, it'll be the lovely and talented Miss Brenda, and she'll tell you, I don't know what I'm buying. I'm like, okay, that's fine. For some reason, you happen to she picks better cuts of meat than I do. So she doesn't know what she's doing, and she picks this really nice meat. I think I know what I'm doing, and I buy meat that's I think is going to be good, and it's not going to be too good. So this is the part where we got brownies, and just come right straight down through there. That's what I call the brown. That's that brown stuff. You can really see it right there. It should look like this, but this is what you don't want. And I'm gonna take that whole thing into the pot so I can get the fat out of it. Okay, so I'm looking at the ends here, and I'm gonna go ahead and slice this corner off. Long pulls of the knife here. That's gonna go over here in the plastic. I don't want that in there. This end also needs to be trimmed. I'm gonna flip this around. Because I am right-handed. I'm looking at this. This is actually a lot more brown in this particular brisket than what I'm used to. That's just not going to be worth putting in the pot here. That's a lot more brown than I'm used to. That was actually in quite a bit. Normally it's very, very shallow, the cooked part, but this one, I was looking at it. I'll show you here on the end. You can see right here, there's the good meat right there, and you can see how deep this got. So that's a little bit unusual. After 16-pound brisket, we're going to lose probably maybe a fourth of it just doing this. Again, I'm doing beef tallow, so a lot of it's not going to go to waste. Some of it obviously is going to get, there's going to be no use for it here at Casa de Arana, but for the most part, everything's going to get used. Geez, how you do the rendering of the beef tallow? Let's put it in this pan right here. Set the stove on low, and anything's got fat on it goes in there. And of course, it's going to melt. Gets to the liquid stage. Of course, it's going to have meat in it. And I'll set up my jar, quarter pint size, whatever I need. And I have a metal strainer. Line that with a standard paper coffee filter. This is kind of strange here. This is the flat, but it's curling up, which is unusual. And once it goes to liquid, just grab a ladle and ladle it one ladle at a time. This is all brown right here. And ladle it into the strainer lined with the coffee filter and let it drip into the jar. Once that's done, you stick that in the fridge and let it congeal. And I have beef tallow. What do you use it for? Frying. Again, we got some brown here. Get rid of that. Let's take a look here. Get that off there. Okay, so I got some brown right there. Just flip this where I can get to it with the right hand. Just gonna cut straight down at a slight angle. Okay, got that. It's got some good. Now that's while we're at it, we're talking about marbling. That's prime. You see, you got good good amount of fat intermixed with the muscle fibers. I'm gonna put that in the pot, even though it's got some brown stuff on it. It's got some good fat in it. Take that corner off. That's really what I want to see. And looking at this end, I've got a sizable amount of fat right there. Just kind of like jelly-like fat, you know. Ideally, what you want for beef tallow is going to be the kidney fat on the inside of the body, coming from the cow itself, rather than something like this. But you know, you take what you can get when you don't want to waste anything. I even use rendered bacon fat. So when I cook bacon, I just go ahead and filter it into a jar and use it for frying. Okay, we're going to flip this bad boy over. And I'll go after some of this fat here. This normally is very, very thick. Normally I end up taking a lot of this fat. This is a very chalky fat here. This really isn't a very thick layer. Sometimes this is really very, very thick. There's usually a big ball of it right here. I'm really kind of surprised because normally I could get down into this a little bit and actually lay this open a little bit and get rid of some of that extra fat, but I'm not having to do that. This is actually a really nice brisket when it comes to this fat line. So again, this is a two-headed muscle. Here's one head. The other one's on the other side, separated by this by this entire layer of fat. In fact, if you take a look at here, you can see this line of fat goes all the way through. So here's our actual flat, and this is our point. So that's actually that's actually a very good brisket. There wasn't a lot of fat. There was a lot of just stuff here, but fat cap wasn't all that big. You know, I might come down a little bit, just come straight down. Keep in mind, I am not a trained butcher, by the way. If Four-Eyed Piper's watching, he's probably just going, no, that's not right. I'll do a little bit extra trimming here in a second. Again, this is all about, you know, backyard kind of stuff. Not necessarily what you would do in a fancy restaurant. Yeah, there's not much. There wasn't really a lot of fat here. Not really a lot of what is probably correct in a restaurant or a butcher situation. So I'm just kind of making it up as I go along, trying to get a certain amount of fat off here. Okay, that is pretty much done. That's a trim brisket. Okay, so what's next? My injection. Okay, so I'm gonna need a little Pyrex bowl. I got my injector right here. Now this is going to be messy, ergo why we have the apron on. I'll set this up. The injection needle. The only thing I don't like about this is it's got a slot right there. Okay, so what we're going to use for injection. This is something I kind of came up with on the fly. The last time I did this, or last few times I did this, I used this particular brand of marinade. I used garlic and butter. When I went into Academy Sports and Outdoors, they didn't have it, so I got the Creole. I'm not as convinced with this, but it is basically butter with some seasoning, so that's good enough for me. So I'm going to shake that up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as my base. This is my injection. I'm going to fill that little bowl up about there. And then I'm going to go to the W sauce. Now, don't ask me to pronounce it. I'm not going to try. Worcestershire, sugar, just whatever sauce. And I'm going to go probably a 1-to-1 ratio. Probably, just kind of guesstimating. That's my wonderful little measuring method. Mix it up without trying to spill it. And this entire little bowl is going to go in here. Again, this is the messy part, and I'm already making a mess because I went ahead and got some of it down there. So I'm already creating a mess, which is nothing unusual. So let me clean that up. Now, at this point, I get it off of said cutting board because I am done cutting. And I have an aluminum pan that I'm going to put this in. So, aluminum pan. Let me do a quick switcheroo here. I'm going to switch this out over here. I'm on the other counter. Drop my pan. I'll bring this bad boy back. It doesn't matter if it's meat down or fat, fat cap down. I like fat cap up, only because when this injection does come out, when I put it in the fridge, when the injection does come out, it'll get in the bottom of the pan and it'll soak the bottom of the meat. Okay, so now I've got that ready, got our injection, and just start injecting. The trick is with this little thing here that I really don't like is that slot right there. The one slot at the end is fine, but this one's a pain in the rear. I'm just going to start injecting. No particular rhyme or reason how I'm doing it. So I'm going to start from the end. That in, a little squirt, and go about every inch or so. And it will probably leak out. What typically happens is that it will, as you can see, it's coming out now, not a big deal. I can feel it, you know. It doesn't matter if I'm going in point or if I'm going into the flat. I'm trying to do both. So I'm going to go around the perimeter until I get as much of it in there as I can. At some point the needle will probably come off when I pull this injection. I probably end up doing 2 bowls of this. Okay, now again, this part here is totally optional. Okay, well, why are you doing it, Road King? Well, I want to add a little bit of a butteriness to the brisket. You push on this, don't push on this. Otherwise you're going to get stuff at the bottom. That's not a big deal. I don't care. Want a little butteriness in the meat itself. A little bit of spice. Normally garlic's good enough. But I certainly want the Worcestershire sauce, I think that's how you say it, the W sauce, in the meat. I find that the W sauce acts a lot like salt and pepper on the inside, makes it even more savory. Beef is a very savory kind of meat, along the lines of bacon. I like it savory. So I'm adding a savoriness along with some butteriness. Okay, if you start to push the plunger and it doesn't go, pull it out just a little bit. That means you get some dense, as you can see right there, it's not wanting to go. That was fine. I'm kind of go parallel to the muscle grain. And that happens. You saw me squirt out. That will happen. Again, one of the reasons why I do have it, again, I did the same thing. Again, one of the reasons why I do have it in the pan. Okay, let's go this direction. Not as concerned about, well, I wouldn't say not as concerned about this part. Going parallel with the muscle. That wonderful brisket. I'm probably going to have to mix up some of the, yeah, you can see I make a mess. If you're not being messy, you're not cooking right. Okay, so just, you know, geez, Road King, you're messy. I'm getting more air than liquid now. They're probably going to have to do another bowl of that stuff. Air at the top, put it over the needle, and push the liquid up to the bottom of the needle, and here we go. Back to injecting. So again, just going through the ends. How much is enough? I don't know. Okay. So if you get on the meat, just kind of spread it around. Okay, my hands are really slick. So let's go ahead and do this real quick. There we go. Get that out of there. Again, also you got the apron. Wipe your hands on. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Let's mix up just about half what I just did. There. Ooh, I did get that all over the place. For those of you interested, garden's coming along really well. Just dried some basil. About my 5th or 6th cutting of basil. Then I got these gorgeous jalapenos, and 2 of those are going to end up in the bean pot tomorrow because I'm also doing beans. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill this up. the needle back on, tighten up but not too tight. Let's put that there. Grab something to wipe my hands off with here. Okay, let's put some gloves back on. Now what I'm going to do with the rest of this, because everybody's probably wondering, well, how much is too much? Yes, you can never have too much, you can never have too little. It's whatever you think. This is backyard cooking, anything goes. Again, what I'm trying to do with this mixture is all I'm trying to do is get, now I'm going to go through the actual top of the meat, which is going to be, yeah, it's going to do that. Is just get some more flavor in here. You know, I want a butteriness and a savoriness. Keep in mind that most of this is probably going to end up squirting out overnight anyway. Not a lot, you know, some of it, not a lot of it, but some of it. There, that's all I need. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this off. We got a row of injection points, row of injection points, row of injection points. And you might be able to see this actually puffing up a little bit. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and flip it over. And get the point. How much am I doing each time? Just about like that. Most of this has already been soaked through. Okay, if it leaks out, no big deal. Okay, that's it. That is now finished. I'm gonna take what I've got left and just kind of rub it. Make sure you get all that flavor. Okay, now we're gonna go to the pantry. Grab the heavy duty aluminum foil. That's not it. That's it. It's 18-inch. Obviously, that's not going to be big enough this way, so we're going to do it this way. And this is going to go into the beer fridge out in the Harley hut. Why? Kitchen fridge doesn't have enough room. As you can see, it's a pretty big pan. All right, so it is now 7:41, and at this particular point, it's going to set overnight. My cook time typically is between 5 to 7 hours. More along the lines closer to 7 hours. Once I start the pit in the morning, which you'll be there when I do everything, I'll put the brisket on, and it'll probably be on the smoke between 2 and 3 hours, and I'm going to wrap it. When I wrap it, I put a temperature probe in it. Once it hits between 185 and 190 degrees Fahrenheit, I pull it. I'm going to plan on pulling it at about 2 o'clock. So we're talking, go 6 hours, so 2 o'clock, 4, 12. So I need to have this thing on the pit no later than 8 in the morning. So I'll get up probably 6:30, 7, get everything prepped and ready to go. Get the pit fired up, and then 8 o'clock, this thing will go on and give me a good 6 hours. 3 on the smoke, 3 wrapped, hopefully. It comes off about 2. It's going to be wrapped in aluminum foil. It'll be placed in a cooler, lined with beach towels, closed, and it's going to sit until I have to cut it. We're going to have dinner about 5-ish. So it gives me about 3 hours for the meat to relax. Now, when the brisket cooks, it's going to contract. When it contracts, it shoots the meat, it shoots all the juices out. We call that the au jus. In the cooling process, the meat relaxes, sucks all the moisture back up in there, at least some of it. And I've actually pulled it out after 3.5 hours out of the cooler and put my hands on it, and I'm like, yeah, I need some gloves because it's hot. It's still hot. So Yeah, it'll actually finish cooking. It'll hit a temperature of about 200 to 205 in the cooler without a heat source. So it'll finish cooking itself. Never pull a brisket off right off the pit and start cutting because it's still in the cooking process. But we'll get into more detail about that. So we are already at 32 minutes. Said it was going to be a long video, and I will see you in the morning. Well, good morning. It is 7:25 a.m. Memorial Day. I just got up about 25, 30 minutes ago. I haven't even had my coffee yet. But the first thing I want to do is get out here and take care of the smoking pit. So I went ahead and cleaned it and got it all prepped. And this is it right here. No, that's not it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So what do I cook out of? Well, since about 2012, I've been using a Weber Smoky Mountain cooker. This is the 22.5-inch variety. This is the big boy. At the time, I think it was about 400 bucks. I got my chimney starter. The particular fuel that I use is oak lump charcoal. It's over there in that black bag right there. And my smoking agent that I use is cherry wood. Now, as far as fuels, that's totally up to you. If you want neutral flavors, go with oak lump charcoal, post oak, maybe a little bit of hickory. The actual charcoal is going to provide the heat, whereas the cherry is going to provide the flavor, and that's the cherry that I use. Let me show you this here. In here is the water pan that comes with the Smoky Mountain cooker. Now, I don't use water in it. I've tried it. I don't notice a difference. So I go ahead and cover the entire thing in aluminum foil and basically make a giant air cushion. That allows the heat to come up over the cushion, heat everything like it's supposed to, and gives a break in that heating process, because the fire's below the meat. If I didn't put that, and the first time I did, I just did it with the pan and had awful time controlling the temperature. I couldn't control it at all. The pan gets hot. There's nothing there to slow it down or cool it, and then it's 400, 500 degrees at the grate, and that's not what you want. Barbecue is low and slow, about 210 to 250, several hours. So that helps with the heat regulation. So what we're going to do is we're going to light the chimney starter. The lid for the cooker is right there, and the grate is right there. So I'm going to go ahead and light this bad boy. Okay, I've got one of these little Weber starter cubes. Do not use charcoal fluid. It's going to leave a nasty fluid flavor in your food, and it's not good at all. Like that bad boy. Put that on there. In about 20 minutes, we'll be ready to go. Another thing you need to have, barbecue gloves to handle all the hot stuff. These are welding gloves. Work really well. Okay, now you're thinking, what's next? Well, now we have to go inside, wash our hands, open up the brisket, rub it down. Let's do it. All right, we're back in the kitchen. Okay, wash my hands, got my apron on, got my rub ready, brisket's ready, dogs are ready. You're probably going to hear them whine in a few minutes because they have not been fed yet. And normally I feed them before I do anything else, but we got a barbecue to get ready. All right, so let me get you all in position so you can see what I'm doing. Because now we're going to open up the brisket, take the aluminum foil off, take some paper towels, wipe it down, and then we're going to start rubbing. Okay, let me see. Okay, here we go. Yep, doesn't look much different than it did last night. I do want to get some of this moisture off of here, so I'm going to grab some paper towels here. I'm just going to pat it dry. We're also going to get underneath, on the side. I'm going to pan down too. Sometimes there's a little bit more of the injection in the bottom, and sometimes there's a little less. This is about, oh, somewhere in between. Now when it comes to rubs, I need to change this glove here. This is what we call the dirty hand. This is going to be the clean hand. Clean hand touching the rub itself. I could probably get away without using a glove, but I think I'm going to go ahead and just have one just in case. Okay, I use Holy Cow from Meat Church as my brisket rub. And I get a lot of flack from some people that are dedicated barbecuers, especially on the competition circuit. Why are you using commercial? You shouldn't be using commercial. And my answer is like, well, why not? You should come up with your own. Yeah, I could, but it takes too long. And there are so many commercially made rubs out there that are really good. No sense in reinventing the wheel. And what we're going to do is just cover this bad boy. I got about a little less than half of the container left, and we're probably going to end up using the entire thing. I'm going to cover it really good here. Start with the bottom. Then I'll go through the sides and top, and then when I mean rub, yeah, we're going to pat it in. This Holy Cow from Meat Church. Meat Church is out of Fort Worth. It's got a nice peppery, spiciness to it, not over the top. For the brisket, it does really well. And I use it for other things as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get the point here. And cover every surface. I'm not taking it out of the pan and putting it on a cutting board because, again, this is a messy operation here. I have to brace it up against my waist here. I'll hit these ends again once I flip it over. I'm gonna flip it over. Once again, I do fat cap up in the pit. Some people do fat cap down. Which one is right? They both are. Just whatever your preference is. As you can see, I'm running out, which is now I like to make sure this thing is covered. Hopefully we have enough rub. I didn't realize I was just about out until I opened it up. It's not like I can run to the store and get it. The store ain't open yet, and I don't have time to do that anyway, so it looks like we're going to have enough. Usually it's about a little bit more than half a container to do one of these. Those little nooks and crannies in there. And yeah, I'm going to use pretty much cover the whole thing. Yep, I'm going to use the whole thing, so. And now, I need to order some more. Okay. I see I got a clean hand. What's the next step? Well, we got to wait for the pit to actually get those that charcoal to light. Make sure it's burning. It takes about 15 or 20 minutes. So in about 15 or 20 minutes, we'll check that. And we're going to let this set and let these spices do their thing. And we're going to feed the dogs, which I'm not going to show you guys that part. And then we'll be back to put this on the pit. Okay, just for grins and giggles, we started at about 7:25. It's been about 15 minutes. And that is the chimney starter. As you can see, we have red. We got some, I don't know if you can see it, but there are flames looking out the top. That's about where I want it, but I'm gonna give it a little bit more time to get those bigger pieces lit up. So we'll give it about another 5 or 10 minutes, then we'll dump the coal. I'll show you how I do that. Set the pit up, and we'll add the brisket. where I'm sitting, I'm about 3 feet away from the pit, and it's hot. This thing's throwing off a lot of heat. That's about how I want it. I got the top pieces are now lit. I got flames coming out the top. Now it's time to dump said charcoal. I'll use my fire pit gloves. Again, these are welding gloves, because this thing will be hot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump them pretty much to the back area. I'm not going to do it in the middle. Just like that. This over here on the side, I got a metal bucket. Put that on. That's the easy part. Let's go ahead and add the center section. And the grate. And then the lid. Now, what about the brisket? Give it a few minutes. I want to get that fire kind of calmed down just a little bit. Plus, I have to put a toy together. What toy is that? Glad you asked that question. It's my Maverick temperature probe set. It's got a transmitter, receiver. It's got 2 different probes, one for the meat and one for the smoking pit. This actually is an older version. This is actually an older, not older version, but an older model. It was an old model when I started using them brand new in 2012. I had a couple of them, but they both submitted to the ravages of time. How they do that? Left the batteries in a little too long. Yeah, that was dumb. Of course, I don't have a knife. I do have a probe for the meat, which will go into the meat before we wrap it. Now, Smoky Mountain cooker. I had a friend of mine and a former colleague turn me on to the Smoky Mountain cooker back when I started really getting serious into barbecue. Did a competition with him. Taught me a bunch of stuff, and he had an offset barrel smoker on a trailer. He's really into this big time. And he turned me on to this particular thing. It's really done well. It's really good for room because it's vertical. The downside of the Smoky Mountain cooker is that it's vertical. When it comes to a tremendous amount of people coming over and have to barbecue for more than the capacity, yeah, it gets to be a little bit of a problem. But for the size of party that I'm normally used to doing, there's plenty of room. Now I have just a single grate right here. Right about here is a second grate I can put in and have 2 levels. Now with me, I like to have the pit monitored. I haven't had this for a couple of barbecues and just been relying on this temperature probe, which is slower to reaction and not exactly accurate, but I'm pretty much now gone off of feeling as opposed to temperature and all that kind of fun stuff, because I've been doing it long enough, so I've gotten a feel for what I want. As long as the needle is on the temperature probe is straight up, I'm good. This is really for monitoring the meat. The way I used to do it is I have to open up a pit, open up an aluminum foil, stick a probe in it, and yeah, it kind of slows down the cooking process a little bit. So I'm like, yeah, I think I'll pass. I'm gonna need that metal bucket here in a minute. It would help if I turn this thing on. You have to undo it? Yeah, because the switch is inside the battery box. That's about the only problem with the transmitter. Let's see here, smoker. It's got a input for the smoker and an input for the meat. This is the smoker probe. Come on, come on. Hate twisty ties. That goes in there, just like that. And now we got temperature, 84 degrees. It's got a metal cord, so this is actually going to get pinched in the lid. It's not a big deal. And this little clip goes in between 2 of the grates and holds the temperature probe in place. And that metal bucket that I've got, I think I got this thing upside down. There's a little clip on the back. Yeah, I got it upside down. We'll see how many barbecues this one will last. The clip, that is. I got the transmitter, I got the receiver right here. The idea is to be able to take this inside with me, but yeah. So it's flashing, which means I have to turn the power off to this one in order for it to send to the receiver. Done. Most of your barbecue temperature monitors only deal with the temperature of the meat. I like to keep an eye on the pit at the cook level. Okay, let me grab this metal bucket over here. Which is right here. There it is. What are you grabbing that thing for? It's right there. Well, the cord's not very long. And I don't want to hang this thing off of the pit. So I put this around the bucket, and then I can put the probe a little closer. Hopefully it won't be too much of an issue when I start using this. Again, this is the temperature probe for the meat. I haven't used one of these in several years, mainly because they quit working. But the pit part was just fine. I'm not going to put that one in there just yet. Okay, it is 7:53. We'll give it a few more minutes, let that pit warm up, and we'll be back to put the brisket on in a few minutes. Well, it's 11. It's not 11. It's 8 o'clock. I need coffee. So it's 8 o'clock. I went ahead off camera and put the Maverick temperature sensor for the pit inside here. You can see the cord right down here. Transmitter is telling the receiver it's 270 degrees at the grate. A little hotter than I like it, but this one here says that we're in the smoke range, so I'm not really as concerned with 272, 273 degrees. I've gone ahead and closed 2 of the 3 vents, so air is not coming in as much. Okay, let me move this chair. Let's get this brisket on the pit. I'll make a few adjustments here. Really a simple operation. Step 1, remove lid. Step 2, place brisket on rack. Step 3, replace lid. It's as simple as that. All right, now that takes care of putting the brisket on, but we got to add our smoking agent. Now, for those of you that are going to be barbecuing for the very first time, once this lid goes on, do not take it off unless you absolutely have to. Same thing for this. Now this is to add fuel, add wood. What I'm adding again is I'm using cherry chunks. This is for the smoke. And I don't like using mesquite. Sometimes that happens. I don't like using mesquite because mesquite really gets a bitter flavor that we don't like. And I worked it down to oak lump charcoal and cherry wood for all my barbecue needs. You might be thinking, are you actually putting your hands on that fire? Yes, I am. Not very long enough to kind of push these down into the charcoal. Now they're starting to light. Another thing, if you're going to be barbecuing, a little safety tip here. If you're going to be barbecuing, you're going to have your face close to a very hot fire. If you wear contacts, do not wear your contacts while you're barbecuing. You get your face a little bit too close and it does the heat just right, it will melt your contacts to your eyeballs. Has that happened? Yes. And I know people that have had that happen. They've had to go to the hospital and have that taken off. Yeah, it's not a very pleasant procedure. So wear your glasses and save your contacts. All right, now you can see you've got smoke. That's from the wood itself. Wood is going to smoke, charcoal is not. Charcoal is going to provide us a lot of good heat. a little bit of flavor, not a lot. The flavor is going to really come from our injection, from our rub, and a little bit from the smoke itself. So we're now going to be just monitoring temperature, monitoring smoke till 11 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, we'll come back. We're going to pull the brisket and we're going to wrap it and put it back on. It's not going to get to internal temperature very quickly this way. And 3 hours for us is about all the smoke that we really want in our brisket. The low and slow process is designed to get those muscle fibers to break down and get all that collagen, which is actually keeping the muscle fibers together, broken down so that it's nice and tender. Now that's how come you don't take a brisket and do hot and fast. If you do hot and fast, again, you're going to be eating something that's has the texture of dry shoe leather. So that's why we do the low and slow with the brisket. And right now the surface pit says 288. I'm at the right side of my needle where it says 250 right here. But I mean, this is brand new fuel. It's already about 80 degrees out here, so I'm not going to use as much fuel as if it was in the wintertime. So I'm just going to let this thing do its thing. I got one vent open, two closed, and we'll check back in here at about 11 o'clock. Well, it is now 11:02 a.m. So we are now ready for the next phase RKP does with his brisket, which is wrapping. So we're going to be getting this brisket off here in a minute. Let me grab some stuff here. Thing I need, aluminum foil. So I'm going to get a big piece of aluminum foil out. So like that. Pretty good size. Now I've got a chair right down here. I don't want to have to walk very far with this. Plus it kind of makes a nice little basket. I'll show you that in a second here. And there it is. So what I'm going to be doing is taking the brisket off of here, off of the pit, put it right here, and we'll start the wrapping process. Don't be surprised if I have to get a second piece to use as a lid. I'm going to go ahead and cut the feed for a second because my iPhone will not do a reverse on the same film, and show you what the brisket looks like after 3 hours on the smoke. Okay, so here is the said lid. Off it comes. Yep, my bad. That's the brisket after 3 hours. Is that not gorgeous? That is pretty. All right, let's get back to the next piece of our operation here. Oh, no, sorry. I like to have a little fun. Okay, now, how am I going to get that thing off of there that's about 200 degrees without burning my hands? My brother got me some of these barbecue gloves. They're specifically used for high temperature. The downside of these things is that they are a pain in the butt to clean. I usually wash my hands with soapy water in the sink and then use a brush to get on the nooks and crannies. But it does work because they are insulated. I don't know if they're insulated, but they take high temperature really pretty well. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this, pick it right up, and put it in place here. Let me go ahead and get rid of these, because I'm done with those. For now, those will go in the kitchen. And let me show you how I'm doing this. Okay, so there is, try not to do this with the, there we go. Okay, so now, as you can see, I don't have enough to wrap it. I'm gonna build up a little, fold these corners up a little bit. Grab my temperature probe as it goes through the grate and the table. That was brilliant. Leave that hanging out. Let me go ahead and do this. Go kind of a little bit low at an angle. Stick that bad boy in. Make it where it's out of the way. I don't want to pierce the sides of the aluminum foil. That's a big brisket. Another piece of aluminum foil here. Like that. I'll do a makeshift top here. Kind of pinch it together all the way around. Kind of roll on the edges. This is going to speed up the cooking process. This is how I can get a brisket done in a relatively short time. Normally I usually say an hour a pound. At 15 pounds, that's 15 hours. Yeah, I've tried that before, and I've had some of the driest brisket ever. And then I started watching some competition barbecuers and listening to them and kind of figuring things out. But again, with brisket, it's taken me 15 years to figure this out. Also something I've done too, as my camera goes down. Oh, let's see here. You all right? Okay. Okay. So let me show you the grate. I had this table's not exactly stable. Now I've got a bunch of, for lack of a better term, debris from the brisket that's stuck on here. If I put the wrapped brisket on here directly, it's going to stick, and when I pull this thing off, it's going to tear the bottom. It's going to leak all over the place. I learned that a few times ago. I'm going to cover the bottom, the layer of aluminum foil. That's a little warm. And then put said brisket right on top here. That's also warm. Got to figure out how much cord I need. I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to do that. I've got a temperature probe right here. Let's move that. Let me grab my welding gloves here. That pit's staying open a long time. Yes, it is. That's okay. It's going to get back to the temperature at no time. I just want to get this over to where I have enough cord to reach down to the transmitter. That's about as good as it's going to get. Okay, I'm going to replace the top and let it come back up to temperature. The last thing, of course, is to plug this thing in. I hate just to let it hang there, but that's good enough. As long as the plastic's not touching the pit, we'll be good. And I apologize for the tumble. Now, right here, I've got my transmitter. There's my current pit temperature at 171 because we just opened it up and let all that heat out, so it's going to have to build back up, and it's already up to 185, 192, so it's going to pick up temperature pretty quick. And that right there is the temperature of the meat at 140 degrees. Now what I'm looking for is I want the temperature of the meat to hit somewhere between 185 and 190 degrees. When that happens, I'm going to have a cooler all ready to go, and inside are going to be a bunch of beach towels. I'm going to take the wrapped brisket out, put it in the cooler, cover it with towels, close the cooler. I'm just going to let it sit. That time I'm estimating at about 2 o'clock. So it's going to sit in the cooler for at least 2, maybe 2.5 hours. Then we'll slice. So we'll be coming back here a little bit at about, well, in fact, I'll just wait till it hits temperature, show you the temperature, pull the brisket, and we'll be good. Yeah. Another thing, when you decide you want to become a pit master, for those of you who have never done this before, be ready, because by the end of the day, you're going to smell like a barbecue pit. Yep. And I'll see you in a couple hours. All right, so we've wrapped, and we're probably about a half an hour into the wrapping. I'm looking at my temperature right now. I'm at 256 on the grates. Needle's almost straight up. I'm at 163 internal temperature, so I'm getting about an average of about 40 degrees an hour increase. So we'll probably be pulling this thing sometime before, let's see, about another hour, be another 40 degrees. They'll be at 203. So we're probably looking at between 12 and 1 to actually pull the brisket, which is a little unusual. But that's okay. It means we just get to let it sit a little while longer, let it relax. I'm sure a big question is, well, you got all this time on your hands because, you know, the pit, especially the Smoky Mountain Cooker, pretty much takes care of itself. It's almost a set it and forget it. Once you get your vents figured out and get the right amount of fuel and get your temperature set, I mean, it just kind of does its own thing. So what do I do for entertainment? Well, one of the things I do is smoke a pipe. I've already had a pipe this morning with my coffee. About ready to have another one here in a minute. But also keep in mind that I've got a lot of people coming over, and I do have somebody that is very sensitive to eating beef. She can't eat beef. She's got a really rare condition, but she can eat chicken. So I'm going to be doing a couple of chickens as well. And I'll have those on the pit by about 2 o'clock. They take an hour and a half to 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours to cook all the way through. I'll take the whole chicken and have it, so it cooks a lot faster. And so that's one thing I'm doing. I'm also doing jalapeno poppers. They take a little while to prep, but their cook time's about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm also making a pot of beans, and since I soaked my pinto beans overnight, I'm going to probably be about an hour and a half, 2 hours max on fixing that. I've got a pot of beef tallow in there that you all saw from last night that's actually cooking down right now. But one thing you're going to notice when you barbecue is that you're going to get a lot of flies around. Now, I was at my brother's several years ago and he was doing some barbecuing, and when he sits out there and monitors his barbecue pit, he bought himself something called a bug assault. Now, some of you have already seen this. A bug assault looks like a pump action shotgun that uses ordinary table salt, fires just a little bit of salt, and I shoot flies because they are everywhere. I got one over there, I got a couple over there that are flying, I got a couple over there. The way this thing works is pretty simple. There's a safety on this side, you flip the safety, now the trigger's ready to go, and there's one right there, and it does have sights. Dead fly. Now some of you are like, it's just a fly, that's so horrible. I don't care. I don't like flies, because they're everywhere. Of all the places they want to land on my bald head typically. I don't know why, but they do. All right, so that's how I entertain myself during these long stretches of really nothing to do. See when we're ready to pull the brisket. Just a quick check. I wasn't planning on coming back on, but it is 12:02. It's been about an hour since we wrapped the brisket. We are at 170 degrees. So we are going about 30 degrees an hour, not 40. The temperature of the pit has come down, so I'm going to go stoke that fire in a minute and get that temperature back up. So we're probably looking right now at 12. We're probably looking at about 1-ish to actually start thinking about pulling it. Again, I'm looking for 185 to 190 internal temperature. And again, once we pull it, it's still going to cook. It's got enough internal heat that it'll keep going up. And I'm actually going to keep the temperature probe on when I put it in the cooler to show you all that it will increase in temperature. And then probably about 4-ish, 4:30-ish, I'll start the slicing process. So just want to do a quick check-in on temperature. See you in a bit. Well, the time is just shy of 1 o'clock. And we've reached temperature. 190 degrees. So I've already got my cooler right there. We're going to get this set up so you can see how I do this. Not really any kind of sophistication about it. A couple of beach towels. Just going to lay one here in the bottom.
What you need a beach towels for?
I'm glad you asked that question. What happens if it leaks all over the place and I got a messy cooler? Okay, so there is that layer. I'll do the other two as we go. I'm going to put the lid over here, somewhere out of the way, sort of. Okay, now let's pull the brisket. I'm going to leave the cooler over here next to the pit, because I'm going to keep the temperature monitor hooked up to the transmitter. The pit's going to be on kind of a rest mode for a little while until I get everything ready for the next part, which is jalapeno poppers and chicken. And this thing's not exactly doing what I want it to do. Come on, work with me. Okay, I'll just figure out once I get in there. Okay, I'm gonna grab my gloves here. I will unplug the temperature probe from the meat so I don't get it all tangled up and everything, which is already tangled up. There we go. A lid time.
You gonna show us the brisket now?
Nope. It's gonna stay completely sealed up. Carefully lift it. And turn it around so the probe is the other direction. Right there in the bottom. It did try to open up on me. And again, that's why the towels are there. And we'll take these others. So let me show you the inside here. Hopefully the foam won't fall over like it did last time. I'm gonna take one towel, just like that. And the other towel, just for a little bit of added measure. I'm gonna let that rest. Take the temperature probe right back in. Put that back up. We'll leave the aluminum foil on there for now. And I'm gonna close one of my air vents and kind of limit the air so that I still have some air going to my pit so I don't have to restoke a fire. I've got plenty of fuel on there. I mean, if I open up all 3 vents, it's going to hit 300 degrees pretty quick. But I've got probably another hour before I'm going to put the chicken on. So I've got to get that stuff prepped. So, one more thing. Lid. Towel inside. There. Now it was at 190. 191 degrees. So the temperature will continue to climb to a certain point and then it'll start to drop off. Right now the muscle has contracted, shot some juice out. So as it relaxes, it'll soak some of that au jus back in there. And in a couple hours, it'll be ready to slice. That's the next part, unveiling and slicing. See you then. Well, it's 4 o'clock. We've got about an hour before everybody gets here. Brisket has been sitting in the cooler for the last few hours, so it's now time to get it out, slice it, take a look at it, and I'm going to put a few slices of the beans over there. So let's go ahead and take a peek here. This is probably going to be ultra messy, so let me grab this aluminum pan that we've already used. As I've done this before, every time I think, no, I got this, and then juice everywhere. Yeah, not fun. Okay, towels out of here. Let me do this so that it's just easier to get out and transport shorter distance. It's a good thing I'm doing this because there is already juice at the top here. Okay, this is going to be entertaining. Yeah, it's very hot. That is still hot. Put the cooler over here. And, okay. So let me go ahead and show you what we've got here. Okay, hopefully you won't take a tumble this time, although it's not a flimsy table, it's a nice sturdy counter. And there, there it is. Come on, thank you. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Very done brisket. Okay, this is going to be a challenge because I've got to be able to get that thing out of there. Okay, and I got to get it on the cutting board that's right below the pan without getting the juice everywhere. Okay, while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and pull out a glass pan. If there's something fall, that's going to be the top of the cooler. Glass pan, right there. And keep in mind, this is still very warm. I'm going to go ahead and take a risk anyway. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull the temperature probe out. We don't need it anymore. Put it over here in the sink. Okay, let's move this out of the way. This can also be moved out the way. That can be right there. I need to kind of this. We got about 4 or 5 things going on at the same time. Okay, my knife out the way. Pull this off over here. Okay. This is going to be hot. Yeah, it's warm. And there it is. Ha, yeah, that's hot. That's very, very hot. That is the au jus right there. What is known as the juice. Okay, let me get this out the way without sloshing it all over the place. I'll put it on the table for now. The little scramble you heard was our dog trying to get out of my way. Okay, Now we start slicing. Move this over where you can see it a little better. Grain is running this way, so I'm going to cut it perpendicular to the grain. This doesn't look black. Sometimes they come out black, sometimes they don't, and that's the slice. Okay, let's take a look at it. Got a nice color right there, and we got the red ring of smoke. Exactly what we need. Okay, let me get this done here. I'm gonna wipe my hand off. And I got a glove on. So I'm gonna flip this up for just a second. Because we have to do this. That's a Texan brisket. That is good stuff. I'm going to continue following that pattern. Let me show you how I'm going to do it. Try and go thin. Whew, that's a little spicy. Where the spice coming from? Well, it's coming from the pepper and the whew, got my nose watering. Coming from the pepper in the rub. That is good brisket. Bark didn't get as done as I'd like to do, but that's okay. And I'm going to put a couple of slices of this into my beans. So that is how we do a brisket here in Texas. We prep it, rub it. Typically has some type of a hotter rub. It's a dry rub. 1 or 2 or 3 layers of seasoning, however you want to do it. I do 1, keep it simple. Smoke it, slice it, eat it, drink beer, party and be merry. Well, as always, I'm wishing you happy smokes, pit and pipe. Peace out.